Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm with Nourbese Flint. She's a rock star superstar. She's the president of All Above All in Action Fund, and All Action PAC. Now, what does that mean? She's the first woman of color founder of a reproductive justice PAC. She has been a reproductive justice advocate for over 20 years. She is also a pop culture black hipster sci-fi nerd. I have a feeling we're going to get along really well. She loves national international politics. She loves Bob's Burgers, Jello Pan, and typography. She's been featured in the New York Times, MSNBC, Washington Post, and The Hill. She knows what she's doing, folks, which is why she's the perfect guest for today's somewhat really depressing framing, but folks, we have to talk about it because not enough people are talking about it. And the framing is how the GOP and MAGA plans to dismantle America's public healthcare infrastructure system and kill women in the process. And folks, you just saw a taste of it with the big, beautiful bill from hell, which gives permanent tax cuts to the billionaire class, adds $3 trillion to the debt. Everyone's talking about, well, yeah, it's also giving $180 billion to ICE and gutting $1 trillion from Medicaid. But what does that actually mean? There's backdoor provisions in there to go after, yep, women's rights, women's health, and abortion rights. And furthermore, as we're just talking to Nourbese, a lot of people don't know they've already cut 30% of cancer research. They're already going after scientists. They're already gutting the NIH. So naturally, folks, you sit there, you get overwhelmed, but then you step back and you need experts like Nourbese to say, well, this is what it actually means. This is what these cuts will actually do, and this is how it will impact lives. And specifically, they're laser focused on going after, you got it, women's rights. Nourbese, thank you so much for joining us. If anything that I said in that setup was incorrect, you're the expert. I yield the floor to you.
No, that's perfect. What we see and what we are like, I feel like I'm like screaming into a void of like, oh my goodness, we know what this is going to mean for people. When we think about just Medicaid alone and how many hospitals across the country are dependent on Medicaid in order to keep their doors open, how many people in this country use Medicaid not only for labor and delivery, but for prenatal care, for postpartum care, for all the things that goes into like pregnancy, that this is just such detrimental to our communities, our families, to our children. And I know there's just been a lot of rhetoric of kind of like, oh, the taxes and then Medicaid, but it's not that bad. This is consequential and probably one of the worst transfers of wealth, but also health that we've
Mm.
seen in America's history.
Can you? Oh, wow. With that sobering beginning, let's break it down, right? So, because what you just said right now, it's common to you and me. It isn't common to most folks. So they're like, all right, $1 trillion cuts to Medicaid. We heard it's wasteful. Okay, like 20% of Americans are on Medicaid. Some people will lose Medicaid. They'll find health insurance some other way. Talk to us about how that $1 trillion cut actually, because you said, threatening the closure of health centers. Make the connection for folks, like how these cuts will actually impact the health centers, which actually then impacts women.
Yeah, so I can take it small and also really big, right?
Yeah, however you want it.
So, I was talking to a partner of ours very recently who is not a Planned Parenthood, who does women's health services and a reproductive clinic in California, a state that is, if you look on the A+ for reproductive health care, it's there. They got a letter in the mail after the bill passed that said, "Hey, stop charging us for Medi-Cal or Medicaid in the space," right? And so what that means is that they were losing $8,000 a week. They cannot keep their doors open with losing $8,000 that they are still serving people, but there's nowhere to charge that, right? So at a
Mhm.
very practical level, the clinics in people's neighborhoods that people go to get all types of reproductive health care, whether it's your pregnancy tests, whether it's your checkup, whether it's an abortion, that those clinics cannot keep their doors open if they do not have a way to pay for the folks who have not been able to pay or who cannot pay out of pocket for those services. So that's kind of like the small insular piece. If you like balloon it up, right?
Yeah.
Medicaid is not like not a benefit where you get like a kind of like a cash value, like you get in your hands, right? It is a service. So it is insurance, like most of us, right, who have insurance. You go to the doctor, you go see your provider, you get service, and your insurance take us to the path, right? It's not an exchange of money, right? And so when we see Medicaid cut or people are not able to access Medicaid, that is not going to give us any type or like folks money, right? They're not somebody stealing from the American public. What that means is people are not going to get the health services that they need. That means they're like hospitals are going to have to turn their doors or close their doors for people. Many of the rural hospitals, like 47% of the folks that give birth um, in rural places are covered by Medicaid, right?
Wow.
Places like
Wow. So that's like
Louisiana.
Republican voters, many Republican voters.
Yes. Some of your top 4 states that have over 40%, over 50% of their folks who give birth use Medicaid: Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, right? So when you're seeing like upwards of those folks who now have no place, not only for their prenatal care, but for all the postpartum care. And this is in a world, right, in a country that we already have some pretty dismal maternal mortality and morbidity rates and infant mortality and morbidity rates for people of color. So like just flatlining it, right? It what it does is it makes an abortion ban backdoor, right? So folks who do abortion, the clinics that do have provide abortion services are going to have to close their doors. It would also is a prenatal backdoor close, right? So people who give prenatal care for folks who are working to make ends meet do not have the places to go. And it also closes hospitals,
Yeah.
right? And so it cannot be understated how terrible this can be to the health of communities across this country.
And, I was saying Elizabeth Warren was saying that senior citizen centers would close down about 20%. We're seeing health centers. Most of the shutdowns will be rural hospitals where people are dependent upon these local communities and medical professionals. And then some people say, and I'm just being devil's advocate, right? Because I think we have to shut down the bullshit. Well, if people could just go to the ER and they can just go to major hospitals, Nourbese. Like, why it's fine. If it's
Yeah.
really an emergency.
Well, I mean, if the hospital doesn't exist, where are you going to go? Right? Like when we're talking about some of these places in rural communities, right? This is the only hospital for miles. And if it is an emergency, right, you only have minutes, sometimes seconds between life and death. And even in places where they have hospitals, like in more urban areas, they're already backed up, right? There's already an emergency happening. What we do when we have Medicaid and we have insurance and people get the health care that they need, we are making sure that we are preventing them from getting into the emergency department. We are preventing them from having like health that is at the like at the crisis point. And what that does, when we cut that access off, we're getting more people who are going to not forgo care and need to go into emergency rooms in order for them to get care because they have passed the point of maybe we could have tried something and in crisis mode.
And also, thank you for explaining clearly. Hopefully, from my question, people realize that I don't agree with this. But I'm just telling there's a lot of disinformation out there, and then also, what people also don't realize, our ERs are not equipped for this. Like basically, there's going to be a blitzkrieg of people hitting up with the limited resources that are available, which means there's going to be a strain on those existing resources and centers and medical professional, and then the cost of everything is going to go up because they're like, yo, we just treated all these people who don't have healthcare insurance out of pocket. They're gonna have to pass the buck to somewhere else. So I see a collapsing, Nourbese, of the public healthcare infrastructure system. And I was reading somewhere, and you know this better than I do, that there is an attempt. So far, they haven't been completely successful. By they, I mean the Republicans and this current MAGA government. for a $13 billion attack on the public healthcare infrastructure system in America. They want to just gut it, gut it, gut it. So by gutting it, we're talked about, okay, you're gonna nursing homes are gonna shut down, rural hospitals are gonna shut down, healthcare centers are gonna shut down. There's gonna be stress on the existing centers that don't shut down, major hospitals, ERs. Uh money's, probably the budget of everything is gonna go up, up, up. Cost of everything, excuse me, I should say, is gonna go up, up, up. What's the end game for them? Because this is also ideological when it comes to women and control of women's bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I have been thinking about that probably a little bit too much of like, what is the end game, right? So we do know that there is a effort to control the autonomy of women and birthing folks to put women back into the home, right? To push this idea of and romanticize of like traditional wives, and we're gonna like stay at home and raise babies, and that's what we do. And we also do know that the number one reason that women leave the workforce is because of childcare, right? Of rearing a child, right? So we have that piece, but the way in which this is going through, I just keep thinking of like, if you put a whole bunch of supervillains in charge of a whole bunch of stuff, they say that there's a reason, but it's destructive because it's going to literally kill people. Like if your healthcare, if you cannot go to a hospital because the hospital was closed, right? It that doesn't put you back in the house, that puts you in the grave, right?
Mm.
Mm. And so, like, this idea of like, "Oh, well, we're trying to push a more traditional piece," that's crazy. That's what most Americans do not want, and also, it is a bad way to go about it. It is like, this is a way if you really want to kill a whole bunch of people, this is what you would do. You would take the healthcare and rip it from people's, um lives, particularly the folks who are the most vulnerable, folks who are pregnant, folks who are working. The majority of people who have babies on Medicaid are under 25, right? And so, like, folks who are trying to make like their lives and then say, hey, we're going to cut the clinics in your area, we're going to cut the hospitals in your area, we're going to cut the senior services places, we're going to make it harder for you to get um into a doctor's office, right? And then for the folks that are left, they're going to get inundated into being able to try to get into the spaces anyway. We already have physician shortages. We already have OB/GYN shortages. This is only going to cascade. And so again, I keep like if you're trying to do the worst thing that you can do to healthcare, you would go about what they are doing on all sides, from research to the implementation, to all sides. It doesn't make sense.
So you're the expert, been doing this for 20 years, and you're echoing the language that I've said, and I appreciate that. It's the world's worst. I told you so, because I've used the word supervillain. I said if you get a bunch of supervillains like Lex Luthor, but more incompetent, and like these individuals, and you give them power, and you give them the keys to the kingdom, this is what they would do. It's not just greed. There is greed clearly because they want to transfer all this money that we spend on our resources to keep people alive to making rich people richer, but it's also a sense of nihilism. And I've been for years, Nourbese, because I'm a masochist who follows MAGA and follows Russell Vaught and follows Stephen Miller and follows the oligarchy. I've always called them a pro-death cult, and people thought I was being extreme. And then the billionaire bill comes out, and I'm like, it's a right-wing authoritarian pro-death cult. They want Americans dead. They want Americans overworked. They want Americans tired. They want Americans exhausted. They want Americans tapped out so that Americans cannot resist what is clearly a fascist, or rather, I should say, a techno-fascist utopia that they have all ascribed to, and they publicly share. Like the most helpful supervillains, they literally tell you the plot. They say, "Hey, look at Curtis Yarvin. Here's our philosopher. We don't think capitalism is compatible with democracy. We don't think that we can use our resources to save the world. Instead, we're going to build space rockets, and because we believe in eugenics, we're going to take the best of the best and take humanity to Mars. And the rest of y'all, peace. And anyone who's alive, don't worry, you'll work until you can't, and then you'll be replaced by AI." That's literally what Howard Lutnick said. Don't worry about the trade war. AI is going to come and replace these people as well. So I sense not just the greed, but there is a cruelty inherent to this because they can't be stupid. They must know if you're gutting our public healthcare infrastructure, people are going to die. Like, I mean, am I being too cruel here in my assessment of their cruelty?
You're not. It's the cruelty is part of the point, or it could be the full point, right? In the sense of if you even think about the world that they say that they're trying to build, they're not it doesn't make sense, right? Because if they care about even if rural white Americans, right? This is going to kill them. So like the idea of like what is going on, it doesn't make sense. And I think I have been like trying to like piece my thoughts together of like what does this look like? And it feels like if you let a whole bunch of folks like again supervillains with no superheroes take over,
Mm.
right? And, like, actually, like, get all the way to the end, very much like with Lex Luthor and Superman, and like, he ended up destroying the world, right? And, like, had to go back in time. I'm getting very comic book, but
No,
did
no.
it, like
And sadly, I follow everything, and the DC Comics has already talked about this, and DC Comics is talking about this right now in Justice League Unlimited. But continue.
But, yeah, it's a piece of, like, this they actually need somebody to stop them from their worst selves because it's actually not thought out, right? This idea of we're gonna have some type of utopia that we're gonna destroy the rest of the world's health and that's not gonna impact us. We're gonna destroy the rest of the world being able to the ability to eat and that's not gonna impact us is again wild. And whether you're reading Octavia Butler, who thought about this in Parable of the Sower, right? Like those things they don't compat, right? Like if your kid is sick, right? And are in space with my kid, right? That's gonna impact my kid, right? And that's the most selfish part of the piece of it. But we should care if your kid is sick too, and that being able to get the help that they need. And so the only way I can like rationalize it is that we also put a whole bunch of people in power that don't like people.
That's right.
They just don't like people. They don't like community. They don't wanna be in community. Like, they are setting up all these algorithms to break us apart. They're telling us that, "Oh, AI can be your friend," instead of having real friends, in real life. And that is why folks are, like, more lonelier, and they're unhappy, and they're sadder. It's because we have a leaders who are supervillains who don't like people in charge, and now we need to figure out how we, as our community, is gonna rise to be the superheroes to check them in their shit.
I think that's a very astute observation. Is at the end of the day, these the oligarchy and their minions, which includes people like Mike Johnson, whose state is going to get just friggin' sledgehammered, but he doesn't give a shit. Ultimately, they don't care about people. It's sociopathic behavior. They don't care about community. And you talked a lot there, and I want to break it down. And you also gave a shout out to Octavia Butler, and my co-host Danielle talks about her a lot and how she literally called this out, like what, in 92, 93? A black science fiction writer, a woman who went to the library, got her education. If she was white and alive today, she'd have like a multi-billion-dollar Netflix deal. But she called this out, folks. And then when they asked her, "Well, how are you so accurate? Like so much of this before she passed away, like a lot of the stuff you wrote about decades ago. Like how did you know? Like prophetic." She goes, "Well, I just saw what was happening, and then I connected the dots." About climate change, about greed, about income inequality, right? And this whole concept that I think is key. Well, it's not going to affect me. Can you break that down for those people who still say it's not going to affect me? Because I'm living on a street where, unfortunately, I tried my best to get people not to vote for Trump. And you had some Latinos, some white Christians, they're friends with my kids. My kids are very popular, have diverse friends who went for Trump, disinformation, and said, well, they ain't talking about me. This is not gonna affect me. I'll be okay. Can you talk to us about those people who still think this won't affect them? Even the rich folks and the upper middle class folks, the suburban folks. I have healthcare. I'll be okay. What do I care that there's going to be $1 trillion gutting of Medicaid? I'll get mine. Can you talk to those people right now, Nourbese?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. I think one is health doesn't matter who you are, right? You can be rich, you can be right, you can be black, you can be a part of any type of demographic, right? Cancer comes for us all. Um, Diseases come for us all. And when we have things, I think COVID is probably like the easiest thing for people to remember, that is like burned into our souls. But it is a place of where it didn't matter how, rich you were. It is something that was like getting passed around, right? And we end up having to get locked down into our houses. And so we know that like just because you have healthcare and somebody doesn't protect you from
Yeah.
not being able to be exposed from the diseases that are going around. And I say this like we are already seeing an uptick in measles, right? And like, yes, you can get vaccinated and also like, there are some kids who can't. There are some kids who are not old enough to, right? And so, like, you usually get your vaccination for measles or MMR, I think, at 1, right? So if you have a newborn baby and you are, in the grocery store, somebody else didn't get the vaccines that they needed for measles, your child gets exposed, that can kill your kid, right? And so these are ways in which we know that like a healthy community is better for health for everybody's health in it, right? And so there is this like very just kind of like point by point that we can map it out. But I think we also need to really embrace the idea of that we should care about other people's health. We should care about other communities. We should care what's happening to the people and our neighbors. Um, I'm from Los Angeles, and this is not a health idea, but this is the way I've seen how ICE have impacted folks, right? I'm from Los Angeles. I call my mom, and she said, "This is wild," right?
Yeah.
The Latino population in the space are not going out to places. They are afraid. Her friends who are immigrants don't want to leave the country. They don't want to leave the state, right? This is impacting everybody there, right? Whether it's my mom, who is, a 10th generation American, or folks who newly got here. And so we have to see that, like, and then, sorry, one other point to that. So the folks who are working in our farms, the folks who are in the hotels, the folks who are manning, like where I used to get fruit on the corner and mangoes and
Hmm.
watermelon on the sea, those folks are not there anymore, right? And that is how communities are getting impacted. And so we need to reframe the conversation about how do we hold and think about our communities as a whole, that our health and our wellness is actually dependent on if our folks, our neighbors, and our friends and our families' health and wellness is good. That if we are doing okay, like if my neighbor's economic future is doing well, that's better for me. That leads me in safer environments. That's better for us, like in terms of us to build things with, right? Kids who are going hungry, folks who don't have health care, that is a disaster for everybody around, not just the folks who are living that life.
That was fantastic. No, I appreciate it. And if I may, I'll just share, a personal story. Right before COVID, a few months before, my then 2-year-old daughter, who was about to turn 3, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It just happened just literally overnight, folks. And it was a shock. I've written about it. I'm going to write a new book about it. Stage 4 cancer, all over her liver. And it had metastasized in the spot in her lung. Only due to my wife, who is a family med doctor, one of the poor ones, a good soul though. We had healthcare insurance, right? We had healthcare insurance, but still, even then, I hope none of you all go through this, even with healthcare insurance and even being married to a doctor. It's still stage 4 cancer. Rare that happens to a girl. So everything wrong that could go wrong went wrong for the first 3 months. And then we needed a liver donor. Thankfully, anonymous liver donor who we now know stepped up, full liver transplant. All right. Now she gets a liver transplant. She has to do it's not over yet, folks. So now she has to do post liver transplant chemo. As this is happening, you know what happens? COVID happens. Everything shuts down. Now my now 3-year-old daughter, who is a liver transplant survivor and lifelong medication, guess what? She's immunosuppressed. and people are not masking up. People are distancing. People don't give a shit. Remember that? I remember Nourbese. People like, I don't care. I want to go have a friggin' brunch, and I refuse to have brunch outside. I need brunch inside. Let me cough on you. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I get it, but my daughter is immunosuppressed. There is no vaccine so far. Holy crap, what am I going to do? And my wife was pregnant at the time. And then my wife, Nourbese, had our baby. All this happened at once. We went through a lot. The women in my life are rock stars, right? So here we are sitting there, relatively privileged compared to most people, educated. My wife's a doctor. I have health insurance. We got the liver transplant. But but because we're in a once in a lifetime pandemic and there's disinformation, and so many of our Americans, let's be honest, just did not give a shit about other people. I'm going to say it, right? Let's be honest, Nourbese, they just didn't.
That's true.
All these other countries, they're like, let us actually follow the doctors and give up a few comforts so all of us will be alive. And then when this happened 100 years ago in smallpox in the 20th century, folks, majority of Americans, the reason why they were able to band together and reduce the deaths was because people were like, okay, as a group, as a collective, we have to do the right thing. It's like wartime, right? But this time around, we're like, nah, F you masks, F you vaccines, right? So we had to spend an extra year. Y'all were like under lockdown for a year. I had to spend an extra year after that in lockdown because I didn't know if my immunosuppressed daughter could be exposed. Okay. As this is happening, right? Uh, that like you mentioned that's the vaccines. She had only gone one of the two vaccines for smallpox. So you have to be a certain age. So finally, just like recently, she went and got her second shot, right? And this was during not just an uptick, Nourbese, in measles. There is a measles epidemic, an outbreak, the worst ever in like nearly 40 years because vaccine hesitation has skyrocketed due to disinformation. So that means, and I'm just thank you for my rant and just tolerating it for a second. All these people are like, it won't affect me. Your kid who's young, and even if you believe in vaccine, they have to be a certain age. Right now, there's a friggin' measles outbreak. God forbid your kid gets measles, they could potentially die or get super sick. This is how we're all connected. I hope you don't mind me spending that much time on a personal story breaking it down. My daughter's, by the way, just turned 9 2 weeks ago, is a 5-year cancer survivor. So she's officially in the survivor. She's okay. She's doing well. We're one of the lucky ones. But a lot of people weren't lucky, especially our elders, because our elders also have compromised immune systems, which is why so many of us have said, hey, man, do you care about mom and dad? And I always want to remind people, these fellow Republicans who just passed the billionaire bill, you know what they said during pandemic? Well, grandma and grandpa, sometimes you got to go for herd immunity. You got to open up the markets. I'm not making it up. Go back and look at the receipts. Nourbese, I also want to ask you about, it's not just cuts to Medicaid, cuts to Obamacare, and specifically the cuts to Obamacare to do, and you mentioned this before, but it's really sneaky because they're supervillains. The cuts to Obamacare to go after women's rights and abortion rights. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we already have things like the Hyde Amendment, which is a fifth. Well, actually, first, before I say this, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. I'm so happy that your children are doing well and how hard that is, and just kudos to you and your wife, and just how hard that is because I am raising a 3-year-old and just keeping them inside is just a feat in its own. So, just a couple of yes.
I,
So I
can
just
I
want
say,
to say
Nourbese, one thing real quick? My son, who my wife was pregnant with Khadija, who's now 5. Nuseba was 3 at the time, who's now 9, and she has an older brother, Ibrahim, who's about to turn 11. My son, at that time, he was like 5. My son understood Nourbese. My son looked out for his sister. My son gave up a year going to school and did virtual learning so he wouldn't get exposed. And to this day, he's not bitter. Even my kids got it, Nourbese, just to highlight the cruelty of the Republicans. Sorry, continue.
no. Shout out for to your son because that is real. So ACA, what we know is that first we have this Hyde Amendment, right? Hyde Amendment has been in existence for almost 50 years. It is something that has said that there's no federal funding for abortion, right? Which I think is, let me just first say that I think is wrong. I think we absolutely should be able to fund people's ability to make family if, when, and where and how they would like to. Um, So it goes it takes it a step farther in a sense of making it harder for insurance companies to think about how to separate the money around abortion access and if you have ACA, right? And so um, what it does is that make it so if you are an ACA and you already have to do these kind of supplemental pieces around abortion access, that states actually are able to make it even harder for you to get abortion access if you are on the ACA because
Mm.
of and we already have the Hyde Amendment. So they didn't actually need to do this, but it's actually a step further. We also know that there are cuts in things like insulin. We also know that there's disabling markets. We also know that it makes it harder in terms of like the caps. So there's some states that didn't raise their caps in terms of Medicaid, and if you are pregnant and get on Medicaid, that there's another cap that you can get on. That also is helpful for folks who are like make a little bit over the federal poverty rate. Um, and still get health coverage when they wouldn't be able to do so, and also that is impacting the folks um, who who didn't take the if you wanted to get in a I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this. If some
Take your time.
states,
Take your time.
yeah, some states, if you can actually have state funding for Medicaid for abortion access, right? And the 138% that cap where you can go up a little bit more to get on Medicaid if you are pregnant can also be helped to use for abortion access, right? They are trying to also go after that. So there are just different ways in which they are trying to make it harder for people in the space of the marketplace to get the full spectrum of care that they deserve. And it can be destabilizing because of what we said earlier, because of the closing of hospitals, the closing of um, clinics. If you think about the Planned Parenthood that actually is serves about 2 million people. Um, I think of 1 million of those folks who use Medicaid for their services, and like that cuts them out of the space as well. There are different ways in which they are just impacting across the board, both ACA and Medicaid, and different ways in which you can like and get services delivered to you.
Yeah, and I think that's important. But people, I mean, because it's so shocking what they're doing to Medicaid, I think a story that's missing out, I'm so glad you spent time on that, is yeah, they're also cutting ACA folks, destabilizing the markets, like you said, which means a lot of people are going to be priced out, right? They're not going to have coverage. And then also, you mentioned, yeah, the backdoor further restrictions on women seeking abortion, which means women are going to die. We've already seen this happening in Texas and Georgia, where women have died, women who wanted to be moms but they couldn't get access to healthcare. They have died. We've seen OBGYNs. Oh no, Nourbese is gone. Where'd she go? All right, let me get her back,
Oh,
folks. Oh, you back?
I'm
All right,
here.
good.
I'm here. I'm
All right.
sorry. It might have been my internet.
No, and I no, I was saying in addition, what people aren't talking about is women have already died who or wannabe moms who haven't been given access to reproductive health care in Texas and Georgia. And furthermore, we're seeing OBGYNs flee. They're fleeing Florida and Texas right now because they're like, if we actually do our jobs, will our states prosecute us? And then you mentioned one other thing I think is really important is this the caps, the cost caps, right? So if they lift these insulin cost caps, what people don't know is in the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the world, we have people rationing their insulin because they can't afford insulin. When the creators and founders of insulin deliberately sold the pen for $1. Why? Because they wanted this life-saving medicine to be given out freely, right? And every other country on earth, it's cheaper to get insulin, but in America, it's the most expensive. So they're removing these cost caps on insulin, which means, folks, that some people will die because they cannot afford their insulin. It is going back to we're comic book nerd. This is supervillain shit. This is sociopathic behavior. This is a pro death cult. These people, and what's even more infuriating, Nurbese, is they always have the cross, especially the blonde white women. They always got that cross right above the cleavage, Caroline Levitt and Pam Bondi, and then you always have them kneeling in prayer as they knelt in prayer as they passed the big beautiful bill from hell, folks. And then Mike Johnson always dropping Bible verses. They don't care. They don't care. And if you're joining us late, there's almost 900 people. I'm joined by Nourbese Flint, who's the director of All Above All, and she's breaking down what's common to her but not common to other folks, how the GOP and the MAGA's deliberate plan to gut our public healthcare infrastructure system. First and foremost, it was done through the BBB, which takes $1 trillion out of Medicaid, but they ain't done, folks. They're going after ACA. They've already gone after Roe. They're going after all these they're going after our scientists, our researchers, our doctors, the National Institute of
Yeah.
Health, and they're also, even after Roe v. Wade, they're trying to just find any backdoor they can to make sure that women cannot have control over their bodies. And so she's broken down how this will actually kill kids, kill women, kill poor people, kill their own base, rural communities, kill elders, and anyone who thinks, "Oh, I'm rich, I'll be okay," how this impacts all of us. A question I have for you, Nurbase, a final question. Do you have time? Do you have 5 minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Uh, Knowing Americans, and I hate talking like this is America. In God we trust, and that God has the color green. They'll say, well, aren't we saving money at the end of the day? Won't this help the economy? Your response.
So I'm trying to figure. Okay, I'm going to answer this in two ways. So one, no, we are not. Even with the own math that in Congress, that they tried to figure out and say like, oh, we're going to save money in the end. It absolutely said that it's going to cause trillions of dollars of deficit, right? And when I say trillions of dollars, that to me that's like monopoly money because I don't. This is like a money that I don't actually understand when it's like that type of money, right? Um, but I think the second piece of it is that the premise that most Americans are like these folks, I actually want to break apart. We had did some polling recently, and we asked Americans like what they cared about. And when we depoliticized the language,
Mm.
when it came to like clean air and water, to freedom over your body, to like um, gun control, to these pieces, the vast majority of Americans agree on the same things. And I'm not talking about in like 52 to like 49. I'm talking about 70s, 80s, 90s, right? So the majority of people actually are not with this like evil plan that is going on, right? They have used misinformation and trickery and all like social media to like entice people into something that is not what it is, right? They're saying, "Hey, come build in community with us and like you will, be able to be like happy and healthy over here." But that's not what it is and that's not what they're doing. And when people find out, they're not with it, right? And that's why we see the polling going down, the numbers going down of support, is because what they are selling, we actually don't want.
That's
And
right.
I actually believe that if we can offer a different view, if we can offer a different vision, a different like idea of what America can be, and one that is like grounded in safe and healthy environments, one that is grounded in freedom over your bodies, one that is grounded in joy and happiness, that the majority of folks would be with us. And that's our job, is to organize folks around a vision and articulate that vision in a way that we can bring people in. Because I am not giving them that the majority of us are with them. Not at all. I'm not giving that. So that is on us to actually do the work to make sure that we can say the vision and then actually do the work to make that vision real, which we haven't done on our side either.
And the poll and the data backs you up right now. Well, this was about a week and a half ago, folks. I think the numbers are even more drastic. The American voter is -25 on the signature bill, the big beautiful bill from hell. Independent voters are -44. When more and more people find out what's in the bill, those numbers go down, which means that the Trump signature bill is a disaster. And you would sit there and think, they just me doing my commentary, and I've said this with Danielle. Why why, oh, why are these Republicans not freaking out that their signature bill is historically unpopular? It's almost as if they they're acting like they're going to win again in 2026 and 2028. And people said, "Oh, Wad, you cray." And then lo and behold, yesterday, folks, Texan Republicans unveiled their gerrymandered map, which will literally let them steal five seats. So yeah, Danielle and I have been saying this electoral reform is cheating and stealing. And what I'll also say, and I've said this before, knowing Trump, because I've taken him literally and seriously, the same man who did a violent coup, attempted violent coup, he'll just declare martial law and say we're under invasion and the power vested in me as the commander in chief. I have to punt elections. If you think I'm cray, you're not paying attention, folks. This is if you think they do not have supervillain plots, you're suffering from a failure of imagination. And I strongly recommend that nearly 1,000 people go back and listen to this conversation I've had with Nourbese. I'll have it up in about an hour and a half, where she breaks down the utter sociopathic cruelty of the MAGA plan in their dismantling of our public healthcare infrastructure system, which will kill children, women, elders, the sick, and their base. Nourbese, I also wanted to ask you. This is heavy for a lot of people, and they're like, "All right, clearly we have the numbers, we have the majority, but how do we fight back against Lex Luthor? Like, how do we fight back when Lex Luthor has the executive, the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate, and controls media?"
Yeah. So that it is block by block, community by community. We have to fight back. I think one piece is we have to be again incredibly clear on our vision and our mission. This is a battle for imagination. Ruha Benjamin talks about this, a battleground of imagination, and that you can have imagination for bad and imagination for good, but we are living in the wildest dreams of the MAGA agenda, right? This is their imagination that they have made true, right? And we have to start with the imagination of radical justice and radical liberation and freedom, right? And then backtrack of like, how do we get there? And that is organizing people in their communities. We put together a reproductive justice toolkit on how to do house parties, right? This is a conversation that we need to like build people in community, take people offline and have conversations with folks door to door with your neighbors, with your friends, and organize in your communities. Join up with some organizations that are in your community that you trust to one, get information and good information, but also to help and figure out who's doing the strike, who's doing the artistry, who's doing um just needs some food to get cooked for the folks who are doing the marching. All those things is what we need right now. And so there is, I think, a light in this darkness is that we know that a lot of these institutions that exist were ones that have served us for the time that they have, but they were never built for us. And
Yep.
so in this time of destruction, that we can actually think about what type of institutions that can serve us and start building them from the ground up. So when we get the ball back, because we will get the ball back, that we don't fumble it, right? That we have a plan, that we execute on that plan, that we hold our elected officials to that plan. And if the elected officials are not with the plan, then we get new elected officials. But we know that that is what we need and that we can do that. But that is going to be something not fought in DC. That is going to be fought on the blocks of all of our streets and all of our communities to get involved, to get off the couch, and get and start talking to people because that's what we need right now. And I'm gonna say the last thing is that I talk a lot to some of our research folks in the community, and PRA, the Public Research Associates, are one of they do opposition research, and I like everyone to check around and be like, "Hey guys, so it looks like fascism is getting real close now. How far are we?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have 6 to 12 months to turn it around, but we can." We
Mm.
absolutely can, but we have 6 to 12 months before they consolidate power, and that makes our, like, fight that might be in a couple of year fight to, like, move this pendulum to a generational fight. So, it is important that we now start organizing our communities, not waiting till, 2 or 3 years from now, that everybody has a role to play, and we need to start doing that work now.
Yeah, absolutely. You've echoed what we've said on the show many times that this is a generational fight, and we're no longer interested in restoration because the restoration to the past wasn't great for the rest of us. What we need is reformation, and those elected officials who don't have the courage of their convictions, who don't have the vision, who don't have the imagination, who don't have the fight. Thank you for your service. You're not built for this fight. You're not made for this moment. This is now a time for the new leaders and new generations to step up because restoration that ain't gonna cut it. The okey doke, that ain't gonna cut it. This is a time for bold new ideas. Enough is enough with the let's just be centrish and both sides and just if we will tippy toe and and maybe we could just hop and skip towards freedom. Nope, we have to take major strides because the damage that has been done in the past 6 months, folks. I know people don't like hearing this, but speaking also to the experts, Donald Trump and MAGA have done generational damage. It takes years to recover from what they've done in 6 months. But as Nourbese said, they're playing for all the marbles, 6 months to 12 months, right? They're playing for all the marbles. So those no kings rallies, that's right. People out on the streets, strikes, boycotts, organization, and on some good news, look, I got the gray hair. I'm old. I'm much older than Nourbese. Never in my life. I know the bar is so low it's in hell. If you told me that a majority of Democratic senators would come together and vote to stop sending aid to Israel, I'll say, get the F out. Not in my lifetime. Last night, 27 Democratic senators, I'm going to include Bernie Sanders as independent, voted to stop sending aid to Israel. Why? Because they see the poll numbers, they see the people, they understand. The starvation was always there, the occupation was always there, the brutality was always there, but the people have said enough. And now these Democrats are like, oh shit, we can't do the old okey doke anymore. We get blasted for doing the okey doke. So now you had 27. I know the bar is so low, it's in hell. It should be all 100 based on what we've seen so far. But to get 27 in 1 year, because they brought this back less than a year ago, was 15. So in less than a year, it went to 27. That's the people speaking up. And speaking about LA, it's the people who have organized and the grassroots leaders, which put pressure on LAPD, on LA Dodgers. And that's why the LA Dodgers did not allow ICE to come and terrorize people at Dodger Stadium, right? So we have the numbers. This is key. And I do want to ask you this, Norvesa, because we talked about eugenics, because that's a huge part of the cruelty and sociopathy, folks. I'm not making up. The eugenics of RFK, the eugenics of Peter Thiel, the eugenic politics of Elon Musk, it's there. Who gets to survive, who doesn't? Who is the productive person and who doesn't? And this also dictates their policies. Uh, your commentary, if you have any, on the American Eagle ad, where Sydney Sweeney has good genes.
I didn't even see that. I've been in my
Oh,
Not Rachel Maddow, this Rachel world. Um, so, but I mean, all I could say is that what I see with the kind of white supremacy nationalism that there's a certain that is a certain part of MAGA is that they're saying the quiet part out loud,
oh
right?
yeah.
They don't believe in a community, in a world that what has made America actually great is the diversity that we've had in it. The reason why we were the first folks on the moon was because that we had the diversity of folks that came together with all their brilliance to bring the science and the imagination for us to get there, right? And so they don't believe in that. They believe in something quite different, in a supremacy, in fiction, in a world that doesn't believe in other people's humanity. And so, yeah, they've been saying the quiet part out loud. They said it with who they were letting into the country, was from South Africa, and who they weren't. They're saying the quiet part out loud with the immigration raids and the ICE raids and kidnappings and how they are snatching people off the streets. We've seen over and over that they believe that like some groups or some people are should be protected and should have joy and should have thriving lives, and some people shouldn't. And some people should be serving those folks. And we know that is not what is in the best interest for our communities, but that's also not what the most of us want. Again, the majority of our people, the majority of Americans want a world that they can just live and thrive and have joy and not all this other cruel, vengeful, supervillain stuff that they're trying to sell us is the way forward.
No, amen. And we've talked a lot about imagination and storytelling. What experts on authoritarianism have said that Americans are suffering from a failure of imagination when they say it can't happen here. When it comes to fascism and cruelty and authoritarianism, folks, it is happening here. But the flip side of that is you have to invest in imagination because you have to imagine a better story. And you have to have hope in a better story, but hope is not enough. I always said hope is optimism with a plan. You have to work towards that better story. And to bring things back full circle, and because I shared about what we went through with our daughter, when things were really rough with Nuseba when she was with stage 4 cancer, we didn't know if she would survive. I was like Doctor Strange in Avengers Infinity War, right? When he gets the time stone and he's sitting there imagining the 4,500 different timelines. And then he finds one timeline in which they actually succeed. Don't worry, no spoiler alerts. If you haven't seen Avengers, where have you been? And then he sees that one story, right? Because he sees all the different possibilities. And he sees that one story that humanity might be able to like beat Thanos, who wants to destroy half of all life in the universe. And so they work towards that one story. And for me, I remember I wrote about this in this book. I used to sit there like Doctor Strange and just try to be prepared. I'm like, all right, what happens if Nuseba dies? What happens if she doesn't live? What will we do? Right? Because I'm the father, so I just had to be prepared. But then after a while, what I decided was I'm just going to focus on the story in which she survives. And then I'm just going to make sure that I stick to that story. And until that story has a fiend at the end or the end, that means that story is still being written, right? The page will still keep turning. So I committed to that story and did what I could with my two hands to make sure that we get that happy ending. And lo and behold, we're one of the lucky ones. Nuteba's a diva, twerks on demand when I ask her not to, even without music. Hair, makeup, nails, super popular, 9 years old. So we need to invest in a story, and we need to flex our imagination that rejects the supervillainy, the sociopathy of the MAGA movement, and also rejects dystopia. We still have enough time, folks. If we're still alive, that means we still have time. And they're playing for all the marbles, all the marbles. So I really appreciate Nourbese. I took way more than I wanted from her time, but we have 1,000 people watching. That's because of you. 1,000 people are watching right now. We're going to have this up later. For those who joined late, don't worry. I strongly recommend you listen to the entire conversation where Nourbese breaks down the attack, MAGA's attack on not just Medicare, but also ACA and how that impacts not just women, but also children and our communities and their long-term plan. So before I let you go, Nourbese, shamelessly promote yourself. How can people support you and your work?
Yes. First, thank you for being in conversation, and I look forward to the time that we can also talk comic books and our Star Wars or Star Trek. I could do it all, and I love to talk
We'll do
about.
it next time. Let's do whenever you have time. Let me know. Let's nerd out. And whenever we nerd out on these things, believe it or not, a lot of people tune in.
Yeah, no, it is my happy place. But you can find us at All Above All um, on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, but we really are not on there that much. And then you can find me at Nourbese on all the things. And that's Nourbese. And if you go to our website, allaboveall.org, you can download our toolkit. It's free. If you are trying to like organize folks in your community, it has all the steps that you need to do. So, and all like linked to different organizations and places that you could find more information. So,
Well, can you
really,
can you tell Nourbese everyone what does all above all do for those who joined in
yes.
late?
I should probably have started there. So, all above all, we are an organization that works to a vision or to make real a world that people have the full reproductive freedom to make the decisions about if, when, and how they make family. So we are a national organization. We work on policy, we work on storytelling and culture shift work through narrative. We work on networking and bringing organization and people together. And we work on what I call imagineering, which is building and thinking about the vision of the future, which I think is an important part of the work, because I look at all of us as architects of the future.
Nourbese is the president of All Above All. Don't worry, I'm going to link to it once we have this up in an hour. And she's also the president of All in Action Fund and All Action PAC. She's the first woman of color founder of reproductive justice PAC, and she's been an advocate in reproductive justice for over 20 years. For the nearly 1,100 people who are tuning in, I've been talking to her for an hour about the GOP plan to dismantle our public healthcare infrastructure. It is not just limited to dismantling Medicaid, but also ACA and removing through backdoor procedures what limited rights and reproductive rights women still have in this country, but also to kick people off of their existing insurance, also to remove the caps on insulin, also to go after rural hospitals and nursing homes and how this impacts children, women, the poor, the marginalized, all of us and our communities, but there is still a way forward. We will have it up in an hour. Final word to you, Nourbese.
I guess what I will say, because I think it's always important to lead with hope, that I am a descendant of enslaved folks in this country. And during that time, I always think to myself that somebody had to believe that there was a better way and there was a
Mm.
better world in order for me to exist. And so I see our work now is to believe and imagine in a better world for generations that we will never know and never see can exist in a world that is joy and thriving. And this is our work, is to pass the baton and get us that much closer. So I leave y'all with that hope that has happened and it will happen again. Is us to do that work to move that forward.
Amen. Folks, this is the Left Hook. Everything here is without a paywall because I'm a terrible capitalist. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. If you have a few bucks, become a paid subscriber. I have a bunch of kids. But most importantly, be informed. Fighting for democracy and our rights is a contact sport. We need 10 toes down, but also we need to lead with empathy and kindness. So be kind, be empathetic to each other. And please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Nourbese. It was a pleasure.
Thank